Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Gage, Dean of Applied Research at Mohawk College, and on behalf of MEDIC, our research center in digital health, it's my pleasure to welcome you to FHIR North. I'd like to begin our conference by acknowledging that Mohawk College is situated on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, and is currently home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. For the third year in a row, FHIR North is back virtually rather than on campus in Hamilton, Ontario. As I'm sure all of our attendees have realized, this format has proven to be an effective way to bring the FHIR community together from coast to coast to advance digital health innovation in Canada. Although I understand some of our Toronto-based attendees are going to be stopping by our FHIR North networking session in Toronto, hosted by our longtime partners, Smile Digital Health. Thank you for joining us from across the country for the next 2 days as we share ideas, catch up with existing industry contacts, and introduce ourselves to new ones. On that note, I would like to introduce all of you to an important supporter of this conference and of all the digital health research and learning that goes on here. Please welcome Siebert Adamson, Vice President Academic at Mohawk College, to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Christine, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Mohawk College, I would like to welcome all of you to this third virtual session of FHIR North. While I'm not an expert in digital health, I greatly appreciate the importance of the work that this community does in supporting the healthcare sector and importantly supporting us all as healthcare clients. Thank you for your commitment to digital health in Canada. When I learned that the theme of this year's conference is Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, I was intrigued, and I knew that this didn't involve the same process I use to get my blue bins to the curb every week. When I learned that you will be exploring how FHIR's versatility and flexibility can reduce cost and save time, I also knew I would like all of you. It's wonderful to see attendees from almost every province in the country with us today, coming together to support Canadian healthcare innovation. While FHIR North focuses on Canada, this is truly a global gathering. And so I'd like to welcome representatives from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Arab Emirates. I'm sure that I've missed a couple other countries, so welcome to all of you. A special welcome and thanks to all the speakers and presenters who are sharing their expertise with us today and tomorrow. And a special thanks to Dave DeBronkart, aka ePatient Dave, for opening the conference, and to James Agnew of Smile Digital Health, a longtime supporter of FHIR North, who will close our conference tomorrow. Mohawk College is proud to be a committed supporter of FHIR North, of digital health research, and of post-secondary education in Canada. The college's Bachelor of Digital Health Honours degree program continues to grow. Our first cohort of students began their studies last year, and many are now getting ready for their work placements. If you have any exciting opportunities and are looking for talented student employees, we can help you find them. I want to also put in a shameless plug that if you're looking to provide professional and continuous development for your employees, please send them to us at Mohawk as well. Last month, as a college, we launched a new honors degree in Bachelor of Analytics and Data Management. This program differentiates itself from traditional data analytics programs by including a focus on inference from data for business decision making as opposed to data mining. Graduates from this program will help your companies both analyze and translate complex information into tangible facts, statements, and stories. I know they will benefit from your work in years to come. Before I let you move on with your day, I would also like to recognize that presentations and sessions over these 2 days would not be possible without the support of FHIR's forward event partners. These organizations play key roles in making this conference happen. And so I'd like to thank Accenture, Smile Digital Health, Canada Health Infoway, and the eHealth Center of Excellence for their support of our conference. I saw some familiar names on the participants list, Many of you have worked with MEDIC as applied research partners or hired our co-op students and graduates over the years. Thank you all for the role you have played in supporting MEDIC and Mohawk College as we work together to educate a generation of digital health professionals. I hope you enjoy the FHIR North experience and that you find inspiring and practical information over the next 2 days that can help you with the important work you do in digital health to strengthen Canada's healthcare. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Siebert. And now it's my pleasure to ask Brian Van Oosten from Smile Digital Health to join us and welcome and introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Siebert. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Dave DeBronkart. E-Patient Dave, as he's known, burst onto the FHIR scene at Dev Days Boston back in 2018, when he pretty much gate crashed the event and asked, where are all the patients? Isn't healthcare about patient value? And by that fall, he was keynoting at Dev Days in Amsterdam, and he was making a compelling case for why HL7 should include patients in everything that they do. So compelling that the following year, the HL7 board voted to create a patient empowerment work group, with Dave as one of its founding co-chairs. He has no background in health IT, and yet somehow he makes good sense to every audience who hears him. And he loves everything about FHIR. So let's hear why he wants us to listen to the patient perspective and help patients have as much of their data as they want. Dave is also the author of the highly rated Let Patients Help, a patient engagement handbook, and is one of the world's leading advocates for patient engagement. After beating stage 4 kidney cancer back in 2007, he became a blogger, a health policy advisor, and an international keynote speaker. As an accomplished speaker in his professional life before cancer, he is today the best-known spokesman for the patient engagement movement, attending over 600 conferences and policy meetings in 26 countries, including testifying in Washington for patient access to the medical record under meaningful use. Now, personally, for me, Dave was important in my digital health journey, as I had the privilege to hear one of his talks back in 2015 when I was just starting graduate school in digital health. Dave made a huge impression on me, and I've embedded his message in my own personal mandate and professional journey. So let's give Dave a warm FHIR North welcome. You can't hear the applause, but let's just imagine we can all hear you applauding. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much. Let's see, is this thing on? Is it working?
I can see your screen.
Good, now let's see if we can get to slide 1. All good?
I think you're good.
All right, great. So thanks very much. As you'll hear in the advocacy that I've done for now 12 years, I guess, it's what I have been hoping for, advocating for, and dreaming of seems to be coming true. And it's a thrill, but at the same time, because everything about healthcare is a partnership, we need people on the receiving end to be welcoming us as well. And so that's what I'm going to evangelize with you folks today, is basically do everything to help us get our data. You heard a little bit about my odyssey. In the interest of time, I won't read through this whole slide, but it was crazy because I was just a cancer survivor who started blogging and then discovered that there was garbage in my medical record, much to my surprise. And it ended up on the front page of the Boston Globe newspaper, and people started inviting me to Washington. I remember sitting at my first policy meeting, this big horseshoe-shaped table of microphones, and I said, I feel a little bit like Reese Witherspoon in Legally Blonde. I don't have a chihuahua in my pocket, but I'm not sure how I got here, but here's what I have to say. Anyway, this doctor was one of my primary physician, Danny Sand's mentors. And he's been saying since the 1970s, and he wasn't the only one, that patients are the most underused resource in healthcare. Now, I don't take this lightly, because I know I don't know anything about what doctors do in medical school. And so there's a real question, what did he mean when he talked about patients being an underused resource? it's more true and more relevant today than ever, because when we have access to our health data, we can contribute in new ways. So if you work in a resource-constrained environment, it is in your interest to try to understand what's happening here. One of my key principles, fundamental truth that I try to impress on everybody, because I'm talking about you, the person in your clothes right now. Patient is not a third person word. Your time will come. Really think how you'll feel when it's your family who has someone whose life is at stake. And use that word stake and stakeholder was a sore point for me when I started going to policy meetings, because we have more at stake in how well it all works out. And yet I would get invitations to go to policy meetings involving all stakeholders. And it was government people, insurance people, medical associations, but no patients. So I really want to ask you to rethink, all right, because today, the person whose life may be at stake can be a more active participant. Whatever you do with data, do what you can to share a copy with the sick people or the healthy people who are trying to avoid becoming sick. In preparing for this, my talk with Lloyd, preparing for this talk, he pointed out, now a wave of change is already coming. So you can see it coming and ride it, or you can ignore it and breathe water for a while. My very first exposure to something like this in the US 10 years ago was, I'm wearing a shirt right now from the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase, where I worked for several years, and Blue Button was the early way to move data around in those days. Now, I want to step back in history a bit, because what's happening today is a continuation of something that's been going on, I'm not kidding, for a half century. When I was in college, back before oxygen was invented, there was a thing called the Whole Earth Catalog, which was a hippie Woodstock era, how to build your own house sort of journal. And it was published by a guy named Stuart Brand, who in the 70s and into the 80s wrote a book called The Media Lab about this new place that had just been opened at MIT. And I'm mentioning this, so he published the Whole Earth Catalog, he published this book, and this guy was a visionary. Now think about this seriously. We're all trying to see the future, all right? Back in 1978, he had this prediction that these industries were all going to be converging. And at that time, we all couldn't see it happening, all right? But this is a visionary, all right? Now, the relevance of this, oh, I love this comment he has about people who would rather drag their feet, all right? Once new technology rolls over, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. Now, if you are an elder like me, this says, dude, get on board, you know, or get crushed. Or if you're one of the young folks who's trying to get rid of the old folks who won't move, this is your license to push forward. So here's the Whole Earth Catalog, the original edition, 1969. The second edition, 25 years later, 1994. The Millennium Edition just happened to be published at the dawn of the web. The book was in production already. Boy, was a new world emerging. And the relevance here is the section on health had this writing talking about consumer health informatics, the new generation of medical computing coming along. And if you look at the bottom right of the slide, the medical editor of this was a guy named Tom Ferguson. Now, he died in 2006 before I came along, but he was the founder of a blog called ePatients.net, and he spotted people. He knew that the vast majority of what we all do in healthcare is take care of our families at home, but he also knew that when trouble hits, like the stage 4 kidney cancer that almost killed me, the main thing that holds us back is access to information. And at the dawn of the web, he saw that new things would be possible. And he started spotting these people across the top Over on the right side, the couple there, Joe and Terry Graydon, if you've ever heard of People's Pharmacy, that's them. Over on the far left is a guy named Jill Friedman, who founded a cancer patient community that helped save my life, and so on. And he coined this term, e-patients, equipped, engaged, empowered, enabled. Now, as I said, he died in 2006, a year before my cancer case. But over his elbow there is a guy named Danny Sands, my primary physician. Ferguson spotted him because he co-authored the first peer-reviewed journal article on how doctors can do email with their patients without it ruining their lives. So if you ever hear of somebody who says, I don't want to have to deal with patient emails and so on, they may be a bit behind, like 25 years behind on their literature. Here's Dr. Sands and me this is a posed photo, of course, but this is how he holds the computer during the visit. So I can see what he's typing. His view has always been that the medical record is a shared, does your doctor do this? When you're in a doctor visit, now I'm gonna empower you here, you can ask to do this. Could I watch what you're typing? Now they might get a little creepy, but this is how we create culture change to move forward. You know what? Humans make typos. And as you'll hear soon, that can be an important issue. So anyway, in 2009, that gang of crazies got together and we decided to form a society for participatory medicine. And Dr. Sands and I were the initial co-chairs of it, a doctor-patient combo. Now, I'll give you a short version of my cancer story. Believe me, I can go on for hours about it, but here's the relevant stuff. At the end of 2006, I had an annual physical. I had a sore shoulder. Dr. Sands ordered an x-ray, and I had it on January 2nd, and the next morning, January 3rd, 2007, I can still see the Sony desk phone on my desk with the digits 0900, exactly at 9 o'clock, the phone rang. And Dr. Sands called and he said, Dave, the radiologist called me and your shoulder's gonna be fine, but there's something in your lung that shouldn't be there. And to make a long story short, that shadow there turned out to be a distant tumor of kidney cancer. Subsequent tests showed that, now this is a generic diagram of the disease from the website of the drug that I eventually got, that I had totally by coincidence, there's that thing in my lung. And then there's one in the left femur. I had a tumor growing in that bone that it hadn't started to hurt yet, but 6 weeks later it did. It shows one in the brain. Mine was in the cranium, right near that. And I've always been an overachiever, so I had additional tumors everywhere. And if you look at the head, just before my treatment started, I had one erupt out of my tongue muscle. I had a kidney cancer tumor growing in my mouth. I was really sick. The doctors said accurately, there's no prognosis data for people like you. But I have a huge appetite for information, and I hunted and hunted with the help of that patient community that Jill Friedman had started back in the 90s. And what I eventually found is that my median survival for somebody as sick as me was 24 weeks. Half the people with this much disease were dead 24 weeks after diagnosis. And I can assure you, this will focus the mind. I had nothing better to pay attention to. And so after the shock, you're left with the question, what are my options? An incredibly important moment came when Dr. Sands, remember, Dr. Sands, through Tom Ferguson, knew Jill Friedman, who had started this patient community. And he, I like to say, he wrote on a prescription slip, acor.org, it's now smartpatients.com. I like to say he prescribed Acor and it saved my life. Notice, he didn't say, patients, stay off the internet. He showed me where to find the good stuff. This is what a modern doctor will do. Some doctors refuse to do it. Anyway, this is the modern approach. To make a long story short, surgery and interleukin worked in just 6 months. 6 months after diagnosis. The drug I got was high-dose interleukin-2. It's an immunotherapy, and man, when immunotherapy works, I mean, look at this. This is the same tumor shrunk. It's 52 weeks later. They never had to cut me open to get rid of all those tumors. The immunotherapy just killed them all. Now, several years later, as I got into my evangelism, remember, I was a hippie back in the 60s. I want social change, but I don't do it by, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the famous Supreme Court justice who died last year, said, fight for what you believe in, but do it in a way that will make people want to follow you. So when the British Medical Journal, the BMJ, a few years later said, we think your story should be published, I was like, what, seriously? But I wasn't going to say no. But I didn't want to just tell the patient story. I knew that a lot of doctors would be reading this. So I asked my oncologist, what would you want other doctors to know about my case? And what he said surprised me, but he agreed to be quoted. He said, you were really sick, and I don't know if you could have tolerated enough medicine if you hadn't been so well prepared, if I hadn't been so engaged. Specifically, what he was talking about was this high-dose interleukin sometimes kills people, the side effects. So I had asked, what do I do to prepare? And they said, it's a good question. Nobody's ever asked us that. So I turned to the patient community and I got suggestions from them on ways that some of them had survived the treatment. And he thinks it helped save my life. Well, back to health data. As I mentioned before, in 2009, I discovered there was all kinds of garbage in my chart. And I got invited to speak in Toronto, actually, do my first keynote speak at Gunther Eisenbach's Medicine 2.0 in September 2009. And he kept asking, what do you want the speech to be called? I'd never been asked that. People need a title for a speech. And I eventually, in frustration, one day said, I don't know, just call it, give me my damn data, because you guys can't be trusted. And to my amazement, it stuck. And so there I was. And folks, this is not just a technological revolution, it is a cultural revolution as well. And you know that a cultural movement is becoming a revolution when musicians start writing protest songs. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Ross Martin and his garage band, the Sons of Artemis.
Well, one for the doctor, a two for the nurse. You say you're trying to treat me, so don't make me feel worse. Give me my damn data.
Data about me.
Give me my damn data.
Data about me.
Give me my damn data. It's all about me, so it's mine.
The 3-minute long song, you can look it up. If you Google that and search for that on YouTube, you will find nothing but that song. And it's great stuff. And it's been a wild ride. Anyway, I respect healthcare. It saved my pathetic butt, right? But there are mental errors going on, and that's holding us back, all right? A paradigm, our shared belief about what patients are capable of is wrong, right? This stuff is hard. What could people do with health data if they don't have medical training? The answer is try us, all right? Our ability to create solutions of our own is limited by lack of data. And it's a little bit perverse to keep people in the dark and then say those people are ignorant. Can you hear that? This is going to be your family someday. So you might ask, what will we do with all this data you're moving around? Who knows? Who cares? Whatever we do, it's sure to be patient-centered. Now, have you heard of the open APS movement in type 1 diabetes? That's the open artificial pancreas system. This is Dana Lewis. Her medical background is that she is a public relations professional, and that is her pancreas on the desk. She and her boyfriend, who's now her husband, got tired of the industry saying another 5 years and we'll have an artificial pancreas for you. So they, and others have this hashtag, we are not waiting. One distinctive thing about type 1 diabetes is that the leading edge of the technology is all digital. They hacked into her devices. They got her data on insulin on board, glucose on board, carbs on board, and so on. And he was fascinated at all the calculations she had to do to stay alive. So he said, I bet I could help. And you can see here, the red line is his prediction, the prediction of his algorithm that he wrote. The blue line is what her actual blood sugar was, and it got better and better. And then they realized, they eventually figured out that they could wire her insulin pump and her glucose meter together. Initially, they wrote the software to run on a Raspberry Pi, $35 pocket computer. Now they just published a paper on doing it on an Android. All right, and look, they tweet on that hashtag, OpenAPS, they tweet overnight, their blood sugar is better controlled than those of us who have an actual pancreas. They did it themselves. Now, listen to this. This is really important. The first thing establishment people say is, well, what about safety? Is that safe? And their response is, dude, safety is the most important thing in the world to us. So that was the top design criterion. You can learn a lot. Just go look at openaps.org. Back in 2015, I got so fed up with the arguments about this, I blogged, we want a medical record spigot, bring it all together. Well, this is what FHIR is now enabling. I want to give you a glimpse, though, of what motivated leading edge patient innovators are doing. This is my English friend, Tal Goldsworthy. He has Marfan syndrome. To make a long story short, one problem with Marfan syndrome is that the aorta can rupture, which is like really bad news. So the normal thing they have to do is have open heart surgery, which is drastic, to cut out the base of the aorta and replace it. Well, he came up with this idea that worked. He took a CAT scan of his aorta, or maybe it was an MRI, I don't know, but they exported it to CAD/CAM software. This is not something FHIR would do, but think about the patient having an innovation idea that leverages data. Exported it to CAD/CAM software and custom printed a fabric mesh that his surgeon used to wrap the base of his aorta. And it worked. So his aorta was protected. They've now formed a company. For those of you who are in the startup business, nobody in medicine thought of doing this. It was the patient's idea. They've done 700 patients now in 17 countries. He was one of the first people honored in the first year of a website now called, hang on a second, patientinnovation.com. Check that out. Amazing things. I only heard about it 2 years ago. And then a very current thing of patients leveraging data. Long COVID, as you may know, was initially reported and researched by patients who had it. Initially, medicine denied it, but now it's recognized as a real thing. This is not just patients, this is patients taking matters into their own hands. In the patient empowerment work group in HL7, one of our projects approved by HL7, that's an official project, is a white paper on patient contributed data. Now that's not like Fitbit or Apple Watch data, that's PG, patient generated health data. This is patient contributed data where the sick people said, look, this is important. You guys should be paying attention to it. One of my most inspiring health data stories is Kate Sheridan, who was a star athlete and student in 8th grade. She was one of the ones I talked about at that Amsterdam Dev Days keynote. And then she and her mother came and spoke the following year. Nasty case of Lyme disease that degenerated and turned into an autonomic problem. 30 doctors. Imagine your kid having she became completely disabled on the couch. This went on for years. 30 doctors, 15 diagnoses, couldn't read a single page. Her mother took this stack of printouts. This is printouts of CCDs from the different hospitals, and she and her husband transcribed them all into Excel, combining all the different lab results. Talk about motivation. Anybody want some fire to do this? But they had to do it by hand. This was 10 years ago. And then you can see the graph, the dashboard that they put together. And when they got it all together, they realized, wait a minute, the girl has 26 symptoms that come and go. Nobody's keeping track of them. Please empower the patient. So they added those in and came up with this, and they ran their own tests, and boom, that eighth grader has now graduated from Oxford with a master's degree. She is completely recovered. Medicine was out of answers, okay? So the flip side of this is Michael Morris, who spoke at some FHIR event in DC a few years ago. He had stage 4 cancer. He's being seen by four different Epic using hospitals who couldn't see each other's data. He was an app developer, so he used FHIR, an early FHIR, through OneUp Health as the aggregator, and he created his own dashboard so that every time he visited a doctor, right, the appointment started with him presenting the case to the doctor. Okay, what I said in that keynote was, let's make the Sheridan's case work the way Michael Morris did. You know, that's what we're here to talk about, folks. This is a woman named Katie McCurdy, who has multiple complex conditions. This isn't an app. She's an artist, and she graphed her diary to show her doctors, right, the interaction between the different moments of her trajectory. Can't you just imagine 5 or 10 years from now, there will be apps, there will be tools that can produce a visualization by analyzing all the data you're moving around. So I was thrilled when, I believe it was 2019, and I did a 10-part blog series about this, when HL7 approved the patient empowerment work group. I call it Patients on FHIR, a world where everyone can use the right health data when and where they need it. You're welcome to come join us. And the 3 corrections, I'm going to take a quick look at them. Look what the board said, though, about the charter. The recipients of care inevitably have a different perspective. Now, there are challenges whenever we get new technology, and some people want to hold back. My early career was in the printing industry, so I'm keenly aware new technology, right, brings new power. So back in the days of the Gutenberg Bible, right, one problem is when you make one mistake, technology like Gutenberg can propagate it. There was a printer in the 1600s who printed 300 copies of the Bible with one typo. Wasn't that big a deal. It left out one word. It just so happened that in the 14th commandment, in the 7th commandment, they left out the word not. So it said, thou shalt commit adultery. Needless to say, the bishop was not pleased, and there were consequences. It was called the Wicked Bible. You can Google it. Now, the thing is, fix errors at the source. And that's why the first project we got approved to do was an IG and implementation guide for patient requests for corrections. Do you know whether your medical record is accurate? Mine contained all kinds of mistakes. The Wall Street Journal back in 2014 had an article on the front page of the health section. There's a study done by Geisinger. 95% of medication lists were found to have mistakes. And the impact of this is, as one of the Geisinger doctors said, if a data is not right, we can't treat people appropriately. And the thing is, there are so many mistakes, you can't make all the doctors and nurses and HIM people stop what they're doing. Let patients help, okay? Not everybody will be interested, but I am. The sisters who took care of my mother in her final years certainly were motivated to find mistakes. You know how easily these problems can happen? Some clerk in an eye doctor's office looked at one of my mother's medications and said, oh, that's usually prescribed for type 2 diabetes. It wasn't in her case, but the clerk went in and therefore added type 2 diabetes to her condition list. There ain't no controls on the EHRs to make sure that mistakes like that don't happen, okay? Do you know what's in your medical record? Here's one more example of this. Laura Adams is a wonderful health IT guru in Rhode Island, in Southern New England. She was waiting to go into the OR when a nurse said to her, well, at least you won't be lopsided. What do you mean? You're getting a bilateral mastectomy. She said, no, I'm not. But the nurse was trained to trust her instructions and said, well, that's what came to us on this paper. You want patients to look at the data and prevent mistakes, all right? Well, I could go on forever, but we're about out of time. At the end of my TED Talk, as I said, I got people chanting, let patients help. I stole that directly from Tim Berners-Lee, who at the end of his TED Global talk a couple years earlier had gotten people chanting, raw data now. And what he said was, when you connect data together, you get power, all right? So thank you very, very much. Perhaps during questions, I'll pull up some additional slides. I just want to add a personal note. First of all, at my diagnosis, I had, lying in bed wondering thinking that I was probably dying, right? I remember wondering what my mother's face would look like at my funeral. She just died 2 weeks ago. But in the time in between, I had the thrill of being with her on the day when I walked my daughter down the aisle at her wedding. And I now have a 9-year-old granddaughter who is just amazing. I have the opinion that my granddaughter is the most amazing human in history. I'm just very glad that both my daughter and my granddaughter didn't have to say, I wish dad could have been here, I wish granddad could have been here. And the more we can do to make use of this partnership, to encourage the patient-clinician partnership for better, more accurate health data, the faster the benefits will just blossom for everyone. So thank you for the work you're doing, and whether you're an innovator or a health tech person or anything, please let patients help and think forward about how FHIR can enable new possibilities. All right, BVO, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Dave. What a great way to open our time together as attendees here. We really appreciate the reminder of the big why. Why are we doing what we're doing with digital health tools, both here in Canada and around the world, and in particular with FHIR. We as a group are often focused on the technology, but it's great to be reminded that what we're actually working for is broad social change, even perhaps revolution, as you put it. So thank you. So now it's time to turn it over to our audience. We have a few minutes for some Q&A for Dave. And I'll admit this is the first session of the conference, and so I'm just trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to find these questions. But bear with us as we learn. And so we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A. I think we're using the Q&A within the Zoom session within the window, so not the feed loop chat over on the right, but the Zoom Q&A in the middle. I hope I'm getting that right. I'm waiting for somebody to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's correct. So I would encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A. And I'm being affirmed that that was the right instruction. Phew. All right, so audience, please use the Q&A in the middle. And in the meantime, I'll ask Dave, as the majority of the folks here are technology focused. We're people who work in the field of digital health, spread across Canada. What can we do? You've talked about things that the doctor can do to get patients more involved. You've even implicitly given some instruction for patients as to how they can, advocate for themselves and so on. As the techno folk, what can we do that's most practical to promote the social change that you have advocated for?
Oh, social change, cultural change lives in dialogue, in conversations. Of course, you can take actions, whether you're in spec meeting, product design meetings or whatever. You can always think, is there a way we can offer a side feed of this data to patients who want it? Certainly, if you're talking about development of new workflows, include patient thinking in it. I can't map it out for you, but I'll just never, ever, ever think we don't need to let patients see any of this. I do know that one of the biggest issues right off the bat is the implementation guide for patient requests for corrections. All we're doing in that IG is, and I want everyone to do it. I want everybody to support, to implement the IG. All we're doing there is automating the existing dialogue where a patient is legally entitled to say, this is wrong. My mother does not have type 2 diabetes. And the provider is required by telephone or paper mail or FHIR to say, okay, I got your request, right? And then say, yes, we'll do it, or no, we won't, or whatever the dialogue is. It's incredible how much pushback there's been to this. And I think it's largely because people aren't accustomed to really having to pay attention to that. But go ahead and see, who on earth wants to be moving inaccurate data around? So that's a biggie. I'm really looking forward to the day. We have some early apps now, and I can't name off any off the top of my head, but some early apps that will use some sort of middleware like OneUp Health to pull together data and let me see it on the screen. And I'm really eager to see the button that says report this as wrong and have it go to everybody who has a copy of it. So I don't know if that's a useful answer.
Thanks, Dave.
It's early days. A useful way to think about this is if you are old enough to remember the birth of the web, right? When the web first came along, there wasn't a lot you could do with it. The early browsers and so on. It actually took 2 generations, I would say, of host computer systems responding to new standards that got developed and new workflows and so on before things really got modern. Today, it's an outrage if I buy a plane ticket on an app and I go to the airport and they say, sorry, we don't know about you. There's no seat here. It might happen rarely, but in the early days, the world hadn't yet figured out the importance of having a single source of truth. So the sales system might not know what the actual inventory is. My point here is that as I say, we're at the dawn of a new age, and be thinking not about, well, there's no known way to do that, but be one of the people who gets to the promised land before the slowpokes.
Thanks, Dave. Getting some questions here from our audience. So I'm going to try to put one up here on screen. I'll take Hussam's question here. I don't know if it's being presented on screen, but Hussam asks, are there general criteria to decide the extent of patient engagement and contribution, which will maximize positive outcomes? So how much patient engagement?
Wow. That's a fascinating question. That's very astute. Number one key thing, and some of this just sounds obvious when you hear it, but it's really important. People are different, right? In the early days of my testimony in Washington, people would say, well, okay, Dave, but you're a college graduate. My patients aren't like you, right? Well, we have patients who have found the genetic cause of their own disease when their doctors didn't know it. Patients like that who have no college education. There's a guy named Doug Lindsay, you can Google, L-A-Y, I read L-I-N-D-S-A-Y, who had to drop out of college because of anyway, he invented a new surgery to solve his adrenal condition, and it works. The thing is, number one, our assumptions about how educated somebody needs to be are not as valid as people thought. Number two, if somebody's in serious trouble, they can be really motivated. Number three, as you saw in the Sheridan's case, there can be a really exotic case where there just isn't big enough for researchers to go after it. Now, on the social side of things, I know there are people would say to me, my patients aren't like you. Well, some people really, the last thing they want to do when they discover they're sick is have to do more work researching. I'm not saying anybody should act the way I like to act, but I am saying when somebody asks for it, let's offer what we can. And this is why I can't imagine that there is any legitimate limit on how much we should enable people to do. Just even house cleaning. I mean, recently, for the reason you just heard, I've been visiting my mother's house. There was no limit to how perfect the house could be in her hands. And this particular apple did fall far from the tree on that one. My point is, don't you impose any limits on how empowered you want somebody to be.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Getting lots of engagement from our audience. I won't be able to address all of the questions in the time that we have left, but I'm going to pick some ones that arbitrarily I think are most exciting to get answers to. So apologies to anybody that whose question I skip. I'm just going to grab another one now. Daniel asks, how can we advocate for the ability to advocate? What questions can we ask of our practitioners to encourage or enlighten them toward patient advocacy?
Well, one possibility would be to show them the video of this talk. No, it's I'm keenly aware of the burden that, first of all, I know everybody who gets to be a doctor or a nurse went through a lot of training. I have no education beyond my bachelor's degree. I know they did a lot more work than I did, and I respect that. And I know there's heavy pressures, but you know what? One of the things that I've personally come to see is it's an aphorism I use in some talks. If you live long enough, things change. All right. And if you want to position yourself as a know-it-all authority, you better keep up or you're going to be obsolete, handing out wrong information. So if you can come to realize that patient empowerment is legitimate now, and stories like these, the meat of my talk here is about 30 minutes. It's a way to open their minds. Now, what you do after the mind is opened is up to them, but I know they're smart people or they wouldn't have gotten to where they are. The key is to remove the defect in their mental model of the doctor-patient relationship. Beyond that, it's up to them.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Question from Paula. Paula asks, often privacy and security are used as reasons to not share patient information electronically. What are your suggestions for overcoming these perceived barriers for electronically sharing patient records with them?
Well, number one, you can't pull a privacy card on me because it's my freaking data. It's information about me. That's like the song said, it's all about me, so it's mine. You might want to dig up that video because it's got people like Todd Park, who was the chief technical officer for the United States Department of Health and Human Services in there saying, liberate everybody's data, right? It's really ironic that the risk of data going to the wrong place is used as an excuse in an industry that's still using fax machines where poking the wrong speed dial button is a common problem, right? It's just get off it, get modern. There are cases where the right data being at the point of need, not being at the point of need, actually caused harm. And the question is, do you want to be involved in that as well? Now, having said that also, this is where FHIR implementers can make an immense difference, because once somebody decides they're going to start doing something new or they start thinking about it, there's one of the questions is, so what workload am I going to get myself into? All right, if we can make it easier now to just check a box and say, okay, send this, that will help things move forward. Nobody wants to be the kind of dinosaur we had 20 years ago where web information didn't move around. We just need to help people get it done.
Thanks, Dave. All right, Sheridan has a long question, and I'll try to do it justice. Sheridan says, I have felt like the middleware for my family and my family's records for the better part of a decade. And I'm thrilled to see the cultural change to give me access to our records, but it feels like there's still a mistrust or inertia in the health system about accepting and trusting patient-provided data in a digital format. Through your time in the space, are you seeing this cultural shift as well? And can we as a standards community do our part in accelerating this?
In the standards community specifically, well, first of all, yes, it's a legitimate thing. And it's funny because in the Society for Participatory Medicine, we had a webinar last week where a couple of us really got in a fight in the chat because I said, the Society for Participatory Medicine is about doctor-patient partnerships. And when we first did the patient request for corrections IG in the early discussions, some people thought that we were asking for patients to be able to go in and edit the EHR. I'm like, no, you know what? There are idiots in the world. I mean, and that's no small thing. Well, there are some people who don't know what they're doing. I have a relative who thinks the government is poisoning the clouds, so she dodges raindrops. Right. And there were the people in South Dakota in the first year of COVID who were denying the disease exists in the ICU right up until they died. You don't want those people going in and saying, I do not have COVID. And by the way, give me hydroxychloroquine and so on. This is an evolution. I have a whole separate talk I do on parallels between the patient movement and the women's movement. Especially in the 20th century, there were a lot of beliefs in the early 20th century. People thought it was ridiculous for women to vote. I mean, men are voting. What could women add? Well, they might be people with their own opinion, and the people thought that for women to be executives was a ridiculous idea. What we need. Sorry, please repeat the bottom line question. You triggered a fireworks of.
I think
what was the bottom line question?
The crux of Sheridan's question is, what can we as a community, whether it's a standards community or FHIR community, do to accelerate? I think what she's asking is about the acceptance of patient-provided data as into the medical record. Thank
you. A really good thing you can do for now is read the draft white paper, or the second project that we're doing that's on the Patient Empowerment Work Group website is a white paper on patient contributed data, because they've worked on it for more than 2 years, and it's really rich and deep and thoughtful. The most trivial example that everyone agrees is important is interoperability for final directives, advanced directives. But then when you get down to, I have something going on, a symptom in my heart. So educating yourself on that will be useful. But the other thing is, this is what you want to do with every doctor and every patient you interact with, is talk about healthcare as a partnership rather than as a transactional thing where a sick person comes in and the providers do something to them. If you think about it as a partnership and start doing this in your own life with your own doctors, doctors need to trust more, but patients need to, that a real problem is that they haven't been trained on how to practice medicine this way. I mean, what do you do if you get licensed to practice medicine and all of a sudden the rules change and you've got to get input from a new source?
Sure.
So it's going to be a social evolution. I mean, marriages in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of men had to get used to women wanting and having and doing well at a job. It'll take time. I will note on the feminist analogy, we still have not gotten to the point where women get equal pay for the same work universally.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Now, there are additional questions in the queue. Dave has graciously committed to reviewing those questions and answering them on his blog after the conference. And so we thank him for his time and for his willingness to take on that extra effort. And so if your question was not addressed just now, then don't feel that you've been ignored. Dave will pick up your question on his blog. Now, back to you, audience, before we send you off to your next sessions, just like to share a few housekeeping details. First, of course, I'd like to introduce and thank our organizing committee. So I'd like to thank Gavin Tong, Sheridan Cook, and Lloyd McKenzie from Accenture. I'd like to thank, from my team, of course, Caitlin and myself have been serving from the Smile Digital Health side. Over at Canada Health Infoway, we have Joan Harper, Joel Francis, and Andrea McLean. So thank you to all of you. Russ Buchanan from the eHealth Center of Excellence. And of course, the hardest working group of our planning committee are the Mohawk team. So thank you to Ola, to Doug, to Andrea, and Fergus from the Medic team. You'll also have a chance to connect with them, all this committee, throughout the conference. We'll be serving as hosts of the various sessions, and will be available in the networking sessions as well for you to connect. Of course, the in-person networking event, for those of you who are within striking distance of Toronto, you're strongly encouraged to participate. Please reach out to any of the conference planners if you'd like a link to register for that networking event. Registration is required in advance. Again, that event is tomorrow at the end of day 2. We'll be posting the link gratuitously in all the channels, so don't worry, you'll find the link. For those of you who attended last year's event, FHIR North 2021, welcome back. We're using, as you can see, the same platform as last year, and so I hope that you've found it familiar and friendly. For those who are new here, please be prepared to take in some of the sessions and make sure that you make use of the networking functionality in the platform as well. Please note that just like last year, we'll be recording as many sessions as possible, including this opening keynote, and we'll be uploading them in the coming weeks. They won't pop up right away, but they will become available shortly after the conference. So if you miss a session, you can always double back and catch up on that for your own learning or for your continuing education credits. If you're tracking the session attendance for CEUs for your professional designation, like my CPHIMS, for instance, so I'll be using these for mine. Watch out for the check-ins that will happen about halfway through each session. That will contribute to the transcript that you get, which you can use as evidence of completion. So we hope that this conference experience runs smoothly for you and is enjoyable. If you do have any hiccups, please private message any of the organizers, but preferably Ola, because she's the best at this. She's our event host here in the virtual platform, and you can email her at ola.sala@mohawkcollege.ca, or you can reach any of us on the planning committee and we'll help connect you to her. Ola has asked me to remind you to use Chrome as your browser, as non-Chrome browsers work less well with the feed loop system. And we encourage you to have multiple tabs open so that you can keep the networking session open perhaps at the same time as the presentations and so on. Please enjoy the conference, and I look forward personally to connecting with many of you over the next 2 days. So thanks very much, and enjoy your FHIR North.